A job it is. And we do have an update on Mike in our film there. A match has been found and he will be having his bone marrow transplant next month.
Yeah, which is great
good luck,
news, isn't it?
Good luck, Mike.
And the best of luck to Mike and his family. Now, if you'd like more information on how to become a stem cell donor, then visit our website, bbc.co.uk/The One Show.
And Julie, we were just talking there, in that film, you've been doing quite a lot of research, or you have done in the past, medical research.
In about 1972 or something.
All on DNA?
All on DNA and RNA and all of that. I had an idea for a book. I saw the name Whangdoodles and I thought, oh my God, long before I wrote the book, I said I'm going to write a book called The Last of the Really Great Whangdoodles. And it was all about being the last. He needed a mate. And so they had to, I had to research like crazy. Could it be done? And yes, indeed it could.
Wow.
And with DNA and finding a, getting a suitable donor and all of that.
Yeah. Do you know, we were talking about maybe doing a DNA film, so maybe if you're free, you could
yes.
maybe do that for us, Julie. That would be wonderful.
You've got a little bit of time in your schedule. It would be fantastic.
Now then, Julie famously sang about sugar, but our supplies of sugar would have been down to a spoonful or less if it wasn't for the fighting spirit of a particular group of factory workers during the Blitz.
Dan Snow has been to a sweet place called Silvertown to find out more.
If you head east out of the City of London, past the Isle of Dogs, you get to the narrow industrial peninsula of Silvertown. This thin strip of land is sandwiched between the old Royal Docks and the broad sweep of the Thames. From the mid-1800s, Silvertown was the empire's gateway for raw materials and a hub for booming Britain. Its refineries and factories produced rubber, cabling, petroleum, munitions, and the sweet stuff. Sugar.
And to keep all those factories running required thousands of workers, all housed in tightly packed terraces. 3,000 of them worked at the Tate & Lyle Thames refinery, which still dominates the skyline today. By the start of the Second World War, this facility had become the largest cane sugar refinery in the world, producing around 14,000 tons a week.
But on the 7th of September 1940, the first day of the London Blitz, the success that had put Silvertown on the map now made it a prime target for the Luftwaffe.
The Blitz onslaught on Silvertown was catastrophic. Street after street was levelled as 300 tons of Nazi bombs rained down on East London. Ethel Elaine was a 10-year-old girl living in Charles Street, Silvertown, when the bombs began to fall.
I remember the first bombing experience. That was the 7th of September, my birthday. We went out in the shelter and all of a sudden went up like that. And anyway, some of it hit our house, you know.
Can you remember the aftermath of that bombing?
The paint factory at the bottom of the Connaught Steps, that was alive. All the houses were standing, but they were bombed out, you know. They wouldn't let no one back into Silvertown.
Ethel and her family were among the thousands who had no choice but to flee the devastation in Silvertown.
With most of the workforce evacuated, it wouldn't have been a surprise if the industry had ground to a halt in Silvertown.
But sugar was key to maintaining British morale, so the company had to find a way to keep production going.
Colin Lyle's father, Philip, was the refinery manager during the Blitz.
They started work preparing for air raid precautions 2 years before it happened. Great foresight. They built air raid shelters in the strongest buildings. They stocked them with food, water, everything.
What did your father tell you about the raid?
He wrote this splendid letter which vividly describes the aftermath of their first heavy raid on Silvertown. Nearly all the factories on the way were burnt out or blazing fiercely, and halfway along I found the roadway full of molten tar, which made passage difficult. But I got through and ultimately found our factory practically intact, though both its neighbours were nearly burnt out and still blazing.
The workers, many of whom were women, refused to be intimidated by the raids and slept in dormitories on site. Not even a parachute mine exploding meters away broke their spirit.
Beyond minor shock, there were no casualties at all, and an hour later all the girls were back again in the same dormitory.
Remarkably, later in the war, with the bombs still falling, a 14-year-old Ethel returned to Silvertown and took a job in the refinery.
You didn't stop in your job, no. You came off your job and went down so many flights of stairs underneath, like.
Weren't you all scared working there when there were raids coming in?
Oh, yeah, but you don't think when you're young, do you?
That gives you some idea of the wonderful spirit of these people. They are just marvellous. And the girls who are sleeping in the factory are the ones whose homes have already been smashed up.
Despite the stoicism of the refinery workers, many were forced to leave Silvertown for good.
You don't see anybody now, do you? You know, they all moved. So you sort of lose contact then, don't you?
Whilst the vast Silvertown sugar refinery remains, the community that served it and made it thrive has all but disappeared.
Oh, what a story. Don't you just love Ethel? What a great woman.
She was the best, yeah.
But the tea would have been a lot less sweet, wouldn't it? You know, if it wasn't for the dedication of those factory workers, as we saw there, really.
Well, and sugar was really important for morale. The troops on the front line love a bit of sugar, so that was a key factory. And it did mean that youngsters back here at home went without. I mean, there were stories of being given carrots rather than ice creams because, and some kids didn't taste ice cream until after the war.
And kids won't believe it today. No sweets. No chocolate.
And also,
no candy bars.
Mum saying
no
don't
sweets.
accept sweets from strangers.
That's right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Because they could be poisoned.
We would ask the Americans for any gum chum, but I, as a kid, never had a sweet. I didn't know what it was.
That's why your teeth are so lovely.
Exactly, look at this. Gosh.
Well,
Do you
we
remember
did
your
have
first
a good
sweet?
diet. I mean, that's right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you
And it was all
remember?
organic.
Of
Everything
course.
was organic.
Grown
It was
yourself.
homegrown stuff.
Yeah.
Now, we were reading, is this right, that you had a prisoner of war stay at your house for Christmas?
He did come, yes. Yes, there was a prisoner of war camp quite near us in Wigan. We'd had evacuees during the war from Middlesex, the Levicks, and Mrs. Levick and her 2 children. And if they're watching, get in touch, because we've not seen each other for 60 years, 70 years. But, so they lived with us for a year. And then my parents were good people, and they thought the war's over, and that some poor German who away from his family needs a bit of comfort at Christmas, so he came round and spent Christmas Day with us. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and if the Levicks are watching, do email
That'd be
in.
nice.
You never know, we might find them before the end of the show.
Yeah.
And Julie, you were a bit older, weren't you, during the war, but you were living in Camden, so had lots of experience of sheltering from the Blitz raids down in the tube
In the
stations.
tube with my mum and dad, my mum and stepfather, yes, and the guitar, which was very important to the Vaudeville act. And then, we would run down there.
Did you do concerts down there?
My dad did. He
performances?
entertained down in the...
It's the iconic image of
Look
the
at that.
Blitz, isn't
Look
it?
at that. And Sir Henry Moore, of course, made that so famous with his wonderful...
What else do you remember of that
Very
time?
smelly. Oh, God, it was... They had little burners down there, which they cooked on them, and then there were babies and nappies being changed and toilets and God knows what, yeah.
150,000 people a night would head down to the...
Yes, and it
That's
was
many.
safe. I mean, it's the only way you could be sure.
Yeah, it's the perfect location, really,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Now, we're going to talk now about the Dougal bug. Dan, so just give us a little bit of information about that.
Well, as these guys know, these were unpiloted bombs. They were jet engines with explosives on them, the sort of precursor to our cruise missiles now, if you like. The Germans launched them from northwest Europe against London in particular. And there's a picture of one here. And they were terrifying because they weren't manned, and it was a hint of that kind of the future of warfare that we got now, really.
It was scary to hear one coming over. It really was.
Is it right that you used to be able to
Well,
pick
yeah,
up that sound and have a
my
whistle?
parents, you know, towards the end of the war, which is when the doodlebugs were coming fast and furious, it was towards the end, but no housewife could bake a cake or do their washing or get the laundry done or anything, change the beds. So that my mum would stay in the house till the last possible moment, and Muggins would have to go out and sit on top of the shelter with a whistle and an umbrella because it was always raining. And I protested mightily, but no, I could tell the difference then, I don't know if I still could, between a doodlebug and one of ours. And when I heard a doodlebug coming, I'd blow the whistle and everybody would run into the shelter. Yes.
And
Dead true
the
story.
umbrella, did you then float up into
No,
the air?
no.
Nice.
But of course, one day I forgot to blow the whistle. I wouldn't go. It was pouring with rain. And so many neighbours came around and said, bloody hell, why didn't she blow her whistle? We were all caught unawares, you know. So they'd been relying on it.
Wow.
Well, Dan's found these brilliant audio files, so we can actually hear the sound of the doodlebug now.
Let me hear.
Here we are.
It had a drone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a horrible
There.
noise, actually.
Does anyone, I don't know if anybody else remembers.
Well, let's lift our spirits, shall we? Shall we have another singing plant?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I'd love
That's what we'll do.
Yes, let's get them going.
What are we gonna have this
Christine,
time?
yeah, well, let's find out. Christine, what have you got for us this time?
I've got a Fern, but she's been a bit of a diva and she's got stressed out at being at Chelsea. But Julie, you have got such experience. Would you like to pass on a few top tips to make her relax?
To make her relax?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, she can't have a nice, gentle cup of tea or anything, can she? No. I think maybe just a little misting would be a good idea for a plant.
She doesn't do it, but never mind, because we have got Edelweiss, and you certainly know an awful lot about this.
Yeah, Edelweiss, this is Julie.
Small and white, clean and bright Edelweiss.
Wow. Wow. I never knew that plants could make noises.
Yes.
I love it.
they are.
I love it.
Thank you very much, Christine. And speaking of
Thank you,
Edelweiss,
Christine.
Coming up, we've got a mass sing-along of Do Re Mi in homage to Julie here.
Yes. There we are. Hey, let's have a look. There we are. Look, over 100 people joined in, including Jamie Collins
There's a green screen, see?
and the BBC weather team. Very good.
Now, we were inspired by this particular number from The Sound of Music.
Doe, a deer, a female deer. Ray, a drop of golden sun. Me, a name I call myself. Far, long, long way to run. So, a needle pulling thread.
How vivid is that memory of you sat right there in that very spot singing to those children?
And that's not green screen. That is
No.
really Austrian Alps. Yeah.
So was there lots of rehearsing then?
Yes,
For
lots. We did a lot of pre-rehearsals, though, in the studio. We mapped out the number of stairs we would be walking down and where we would be running here and what we would be doing there. So the choreography was, we knew it before we even got there,
Right.
and then it was a case of
And looking at
enacting
that
it.
particular scene there, I mean, your finger placement on guitar
Well,
was superb.
thank
Did
you. I had a horrible time doing it. They kept
you?
saying, we want you back in the trailer now to keep practicing, you know. Because
Yeah.
I didn't really.
You didn't play guitar?
Not until I had to do I couldn't do it now.
And did you play a little bit after? I play guitar myself. I'm
Do
sorry.
you?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just
My grandson does. One of
All
my
right.
grandsons.
Very
Well,
good.
two of my grandsons,
Are
actually.
you saying you didn't play the guitar?
No, I did.
no, she did.
did.
Yeah.
I did, but it took, you know, I mean, I couldn't do
Not
it
easy.
now.
No.
No, it's quite intricate,
Do you?
isn't it?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, Julie's big break on the silver screen is down to one of the biggest film producers in the world.
Yes, and years before he set eyes on Julie, he spent a bit of time over here. Here's Giles.
This little Lincolnshire village has a surprising and star-studded connection with Hollywood. The clue is in the name, Norton Disney. It was here, on the 6th of July, 1949, that Walt Disney, creator of countless children's classics, arrived unexpectedly with his wife and 2 children. The local newspapers reported that he was on his holidays. Walt was already in the UK filming Treasure Island, his first film with actors rather than cartoons, and he took the trip from Devon to here in Lincolnshire. Of course, he didn't turn up in Norton Disney entirely by chance. Walt and his family spent some time exploring the village and chatting to local residents. He visited the local pub for a drop of cider, perhaps a taste he'd picked up from filming in the West Country. But it wasn't just the current residents that had attracted Walt Disney to the village. He was keen to visit St. Peter's Parish Church to look at the graves. Alan Haynes is Norton Disney's local historian. In 1949, Walt Disney and the vicar of the day stood where we're standing now. Where exactly are we standing?
Well, this is known as the Mortuary Chapel, and it was started by Joan Disney, who was buried on the far side there, and she was the first one to be buried here.
How many Disneys have you got here in all?
We've got 5 actually with tombs, but there are many other Disneys buried here under the floor of the church.
Walt Disney came here, stood here, and do you think he thought, well, is there a family resemblance? Walt could trace his own family back to the 1700s in Kilkenny, Ireland, but had never found records dating back any further. The Norton Disneys buried here at St. Peter's came from a powerful French family and arrived in England sometime after the 11th century. And the belief is the Disney family came over after the Norman conquest and settled here.
Well, they came over shortly after William the Conqueror came in 1066, and it's thought they came over towards the end of that century.
And they settled here for hundreds of years. So were they related to Walt? He seemed to think so, and although the footage has never been released, he spent some time filming the tombs on his cine camera. The storylines of many Disney movies feature a strange soul searching for their family. So perhaps it was a case of life imitating art when Walt Disney visited Norton Disney to rifle through the parish records. The current custodian of those records is Dr. Mike Rogers from the Lincolnshire Archives. What's the earliest reference to the family you found in your archives?
This little deed here, which dates from the late 13th century, does mention paying a rent to Lord William de Isigny.
De Isigny means of Isigny, from the French. And at that time, spelling hadn't settled down, so you'd expect a variety of spellings of the name.
Absolutely. I mean, the people probably couldn't write themselves. It's just how the person writing the deed heard the name.
By what time have we got the name Disney as we'd recognise it?
Certainly, 16th century, we're getting recognisable Disneys with an EY at the end. Yeah.
But the spelling of his family name isn't the only parallel between Walt and these Lincolnshire nobles.
It does mention, as one of the boundaries of the land, a bit of a ceiling of land called Disneyland.
Ah! Disneyland, there it is! The original Disneyland. What does this date from?
1386.
1386, folks, 1386. It all started in Lincoln. I knew it, you know. I absolutely knew it. We've got rights in that mouse. So is there a link between Walt Disney and the Disneyland of Lincolnshire? Remarkably, one record states, in 1651, a branch of the Disney family certified by William Disney of Norton Disney was established in Ireland. But sadly, there's still no evidence to prove that the noble Norton Disneys were related to Walt's own Irish bloodline. Proof or not, Walt's living relatives seem to have made up their minds about the origins of their family name, because 50 years later, when his niece also came to visit the Disney tombs, she signed the visitor's book, Mary S. Disney, direct descendant.
No. What a brilliant, brilliant story.
These two are at it again. They're just chatting away.
They're having a little chat.
We're back on.
Yeah, we're back on.
We can't stop chatting.
No, can we ask you about Mary Poppins? Because is it right that you originally turned down the role?
No, I didn't turn it down. Mr. Disney came backstage when I was performing in Camelot and asked, I mean, I thought he was just being nice and coming to visit, but he asked, would I be interested in coming to Hollywood to see the designs and to hear the songs that he was planning for this movie that he intended to make. And I was horrified, and I said, oh, Mr. Disney, I would love it, but I have to tell you, I'm pregnant. I was 3 months pregnant. And he said, well, that's all right, we'll wait.
Oh.
And, you know, really? Because they were barely in pre-production. So you know how long it takes to get a movie up and running and ready for the screen, by which time I'd had my lovely daughter Emma, and 3 months after she was born, off I went with my husband at that time to Disney.
And Camelot, and you did that with Richard Burton?
Yes.
And anybody else?
Yes, Billy Squires subbed for Richard at one point, and when after Richard left, he left before I did, and he went off to make Cleopatra, Richard.
Do you always get a little tingle when you come back to London? Because honestly, when I drive home, I always think about Mary Poppins and, you know...
Especially if it's in the spring and things like... I mean, I love this country. I love my country. It is my country. Yeah.
And isn't it the best thing that our greatest performer of your generation sings with an English accent?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Love it.
Well, I've had to blend it.
A little bit, but no, I mean...